PodCastle, episode 765, for Tuesday the 13th of December 2022. Part 2 of The Science and Artistry of Snake Oil Salesmanship by Timothy Moody, read by Jaros Durnett and rated PG-13. Good morning, good day, good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to PodCastle, the flying castle of fantasy fiction. I'm your host, Matt Dovey, and it's my honour and delight to present for your enjoyment the conclusion of The Science and Artistry of Snake Oil Salesmanship by Timothy Moody, narrated by Jaros Durnett. We ran the first half of this story last week, so if you've just dropped in, hold it right there and back up a moment. You want to go check the previous episode first, else you'll not know a darn thing about what's going on here today. This story was first published at Beneath Ceaseless Skies in December 2020, and we hope you enjoy its conclusion. Timothy Moody is a speculative fiction writer and an editor of all sorts of genres. His fiction has appeared in various magazines, anthologies and podcasts, including Lightspeed, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Daily Science Fiction, Wastelands: A New Apocalypse, and LeVar Burton Reads. He lives outside of Boston with his wife and 2 sons. Find him online at timothymoody.com or on Twitter at Timothy_Moody. Jaros Durnett is a middleman. Middle-aged, middle child, living in the middle of the United States. After living most of his life in such exotic locations as Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi and Tennessee, he relocated to Chicagoland, where he spends his time working in corporate America. Jaros is a lifelong skeptic who loves reading stories of fantasy and the paranormal, both silently and aloud. Now, last we left off, Al and his friend the giant talking snake had sold their snake oil, a genuine article, to the folk of a small frontier town, but caught the suspicions of the sheriff in doing so. A sheriff who, as it happened, came from the very town where Al had first met his serpentine friend a decade previous. And now, there's only one place left for them to head in shilling their wares. Back to Al's hometown of Portico, and whatever welcome he can expect there. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin, and you need to tread careful on these hometown streets of yours.
Portico, threshold of the frontier, jewel of the prairie, a town of graded roads and running water. At least it had been in the nicer parts where the rich folk lived, devising their schemes to fleece the desperate men and women passing through on their way to make a living on the frontier, a living that would become much harder once they were taken for whatever meager belongings they had, and no one batted an eye at that. But try turning it around and conning the rich for once, and suddenly you've gone too far and got declared persona non grata. Fair play, Al has learned, to his unending chagrin, is not a virtue held by the city mothers and fathers of Portico, his own father least of all. On the way to town, Al tried to disguise himself with what sparse implements he could lay hands on. With the same knife he uses to play Battlesnake, he lopped off hunks of hair and crudely fashioned them into a push-broom mustache that he affixed to his upper lip with pine sap and prayer. He considered trying for a full beard, but couldn't commit to shearing off all the hair on his head. His hairline had been receding for years. No need to encourage it into a full retreat. He is supposed to wait his customary 1.5 days after Snake begins menacing the town, snatching livestock, hissing and snapping threateningly at passing stagecoaches, the old standbys. But Al's impatience gets the better of him. This isn't some newly erected settlement. The people of Portico will fight back, and hard. Despite Al's warnings, Snake doesn't truly savvy what she's in for, doesn't realize that this town may well outmatch them both. Al rides into town at full speed, wagon clattering along the uneven dirt until he gets close enough that suddenly the road is graded and even, and the wheels fairly slide along it. Snake is nowhere to be seen, hopefully hiding somewhere, biding her time between attacks, ensuring she is seen by enough people to cause panic, but not so many as to put her in immediate danger. It's a dangerous balancing act, their game. The trick to getting people to drink the snake oil is convincing them to fear the snake but trust the salesman. A cadre of grim-faced men and women, armed with shotguns and long rifles, stand guard at the juncture of the road and the town. Sentinels against the encroachment of the untamed frontier. Any who can't hack it out there wind up back in Portico eventually, or dead. Al worries that today he's going to end up both. He slows the wagon as he approaches the group. Before they can see him clearly, he takes a deep breath, composes his face into a standing, disarming grin. The wagon rolls up to Portico as languorously as if it's carrying two lovers on a holiday ride. "Heard tell you folks have a snake problem." "Bad news travels fast," says a young woman, 20 years old if she's a day. Streaks of blue dye color her otherwise stark white hair. Something about her reminds Al of someone he knows, but he can't place it. A mustache hair has worked its way free and tickles upward at his eye, which waters and obscures his vision. The woman, the group's apparent leader, steps forward. "Let me make a prediction. You've come to help us. You'll kill the rattler, and all the pay you'll ask is the chance to harvest its oil to help heal our town." Al smiles coldly. The one time his reputation precedes him, and it's here. Still, he can hope that the people of Portico only know the broad strokes of his story. Certainly they don't know who he really is, or else someone would have come for him before now. He opens his mouth to introduce himself with a false name when the woman cuts him off. "Aloysius P. McNutt," she says. "We've been expecting you." So much for his disguise. He studies the woman's face through teary eyes, tries to blink away the hair. God, she's familiar. More than vaguely. Probably someone he wronged. It's a longish list. "What an unalloyed pleasure to hear," he blusters. Nothing for it now but to push ahead full tilt. "Dare I say there is none on the frontier possessing the expertise that—" "Stuff it, thief," the woman says. "Insults are hardly—" "And take off that damn mustache. You look like a half-wit ignoramus." The term jars loose a memory. That particularly oxymoronic insult is a favorite of his father's and one frequently directed at Aloysius P. McNutt during his formative years. Inwardly, he sighs to recognize what's become of his sister, but outwardly he smiles. "Hello, Althea," he says. "You grew up." "And you just got old." She smirks at her own wit. Al can't help but quirk the corner of his mouth as well. Quick on her feet, his sister, true McNutt. This may require a less flamboyant tact than usual. Al fixes his eyes on his sister's and sincerity infuses every word. "Regardless of any past quarrels, the fact remains that a snake threatens this town. To right old wrongs, I am prepared to provide my services and the resulting elixir at a more than agreeable rate." Spite from Althea's eyes. "By which I mean, of course, free of charge. Call it restitution." "You threw away my inheritance," Althea yells. "I was born first," Al snaps, emotion finally getting the better of him. "And I doubt the people who benefited from its theft considered it thrown away." "See for yourself how well it benefited them," Althea says. "We'll deposit you into one of the very cells they once occupied." Uneasy coughing. "Excuse me? Illegally destroyed contracts remain enforceable in Portico, and any who attempt doctoring without the benefit of father's protection were punished accordingly. As for you, you are a charlatan and a thief. Aspersions aside, someone needs to deal with the snake." He's trying to hide his rising desperation, but this is Al's one chance, his sole hope to buy enough time to slip this trap before the jaws fully shut on him. "I'll handle that." Perplexed and annoyed as Al is, it takes a moment to place, but sure enough, stepping forward, vexatious as ever, is none other than Sheriff Stenville, sporting an expression of combined satisfaction, cunning, and smugness. He must have followed Al here, slipped into town while Al waited for Snake to wreak her havoc. Can't he leave well enough alone? "Believe you're out of your jurisdiction, Sheriff," Al says coldly. "And I believe such strictures apply only to human query," Stenville replies. "And I further believe that you two are in cahoots." "Cahoots?" Al laughs. "With a mindless serpent? If that's not the most ridiculous—" He trails off as his sister directs 3 bulky posse members towards him. "I don't suppose I could appeal to father for clemency?" he asks Althea. "Not without a medium," she replies. "Father died 3 years ago." The men wrestle Al from his seat on the wagon. Though he doesn't struggle, the last thing he does before they bind his wrists with stout, scratchy rope is to pluck the mustache from his lip. Their father's favorite, Al is right. it did make him look like a half-wit ignoramus. Over the course of his life, not solely in the past week, Al has spent his share of nights in jail cells. Such is the life of a snake oil salesman. One thing he's learned is that people love to gloat at prisoners. Stenval and Althea visit in tandem, which Al appreciates. Get everything out of the way at once. Give him some more time to puzzle out an escape from this trap. They stroll to Al's cell, the last in a row of them, each occupied by some poor man or woman who couldn't pay off a debt or got caught trying to better the standing of them and theirs. The ones who didn't get caught built the jail and hold the keys. "You're not half the salesman you think you are," Stenval says without preamble. Hackles rise on the back of Al's neck. He's smart enough not to tussle. Besides, he knows he's a hell of a salesman. Better play along. Mouth crooked in wry acknowledgement, Al half nods. "Might be you have a point there." "I read it in your eyes back home," Stenval says. "You weren't telling me the truth, not all of it. And what do you know? Barely outside town limits, I spy an allegedly dead snake slither out of your wagon and go hunting, bringing you a moa like a bird dog with a pheasant. That's when I knew. That's the same snake that killed my family, that destroyed our town, and you sold your soul to it for a little coin." "Quite a bit of coin, actually," Al mumbles. Louder, he adds, "Snake never hurt anyone. She tells me she's innocent. I trust her more than I trust you. A desire for revenge curdles the heart and addles your mind. You've been living with it for so many years now, I reckon you've mixed up what's real and what you've imagined." "The snake's a killer, and it'll get what's coming to it," Stenval snaps. Althea lays a hand on his shoulder and he steps back, huffing. Too easy to rile this man. "And you, sister?" Al asks. "What do you gain from this?" She sniffs haughtily. "Must be that I'm curdled and addled myself, but I expect that watching you hang will leave me mighty satisfied." There it is, the sentence. Al's burgeoning confidence deflates as he feels the noose scratch his throat and visions his feet dancing in the breeze. "There's no call for that," but his usual cajoling tone now rings flat. "You got everything back. The money father wanted you to inherit, the business, they're yours. My gambit failed, burning the contracts, freeing Portico's doctors to help those who really need it, letting people live their healthy lives and out from under father's thumb. It's exceedingly clear that it didn't stick, so what do you have to seek revenge for?" Al isn't trying to talk her into anything. He honestly wants to know. Althea grits her teeth. "Father was never the same after you left. You'd think he actually still wanted you around. Maybe he enjoyed the fighting. Maybe your actions made him see the so-called error of his ways. I don't know. But he was never the same, and he never treated me the same after that either, even after I took over the business. Althea, you tried to ruin us, and he had the gall to miss you." She swivels, pointing one parting shot over her shoulder. "That's enough evidence for me that you're nothing but an infection that needs to be scraped out." And she's gone, the air in her wake positively crackling with spite. That's that, then. Al's not getting anywhere appealing to the familial bonds. If there's any comfort to be had, it's that Snake won't meet the same end. She knows to skip town if Al doesn't show, before someone who actually wants to hurt her can take their shot. He wishes they'd had a proper send-off after all these years, but their lives were thrown together randomly enough, so what's to say a random sundering isn't a proper ending? "It'll be quite the sight," Stenval remarks. "You, wiggling on a rope like a worm on a hook." Maybe he intended to give away their plan, and maybe not. It could have been a slip of the tongue. Stenval, too eager to demonstrate his own cleverness. But with that turn of phrase, Al realizes that Snake might not be so safe after all. The people of Portico aren't merely hanging Al, they're using him as bait. Long before humanity arrived on the continent that would eventually become home to Portico and Stenval's Folly, and the big cities of the north and the chicken-feed scatter of frontier towns to the south, gargantuan animals roamed the prairie and forest and deserts and steppes. Moa and snub-snouted bear and stilt-legged caribou and carnivorous bats whose wings obscured the moon, and armadillo the size of stagecoaches, and so very many snakes. rattlers and vipers and bloatheads and cottonmouths and pythons and corals and pipes and split jaws. They hunted in tall grass and twined themselves up massive tree trunks and sunned themselves alongside burbling streams. Some took up residence in caves. Those hidden serpents survived longer than the rest when humanity showed up and began doing what humanity does to nature, namely, taming it violently. Not all such creatures were hunted to extinction over the centuries of slow human dispersal, but all came near to it, especially the ones that could speak. Begging for survival only made people despise them more for their attempts at being equal to humanity. Eventually, however, equilibrium established itself and humanity settled into an uneasy peace with the continent's dumb, bestial remnants. By the time the first settlers established a camp and trading post at the spot that would become known as Ki Mama, and later Stenville Mine, and eventually Stenville's Folly, Snake was the only one of her kind remaining, and she didn't even know it, having spent so many decades hibernating deep underground. Woken by the first stirrings of the mining operation, little more at that time than some men and women tentatively probing the cave walls with primitive pickaxes, Snake cautiously introduced herself. After the humans regained their composure, Snake and they struck a bargain. Safety for Snake, health and happiness for the people of Ki Mama. It was not ideal for Snake, but she was alive and she worked with the people. She was content enough. For years, the arrangement held, and the village prospered. The people there took relatively little from the mine, instead living by farming, fishing, and trapping. Snake devoured the occasional cow or pig or mouthful of turkeys, but she always asked first, and the farmers were more than happy to grant her permission. Children dared each other to sneak into Snake's cave, and she would oblige their fear-seeking with a theatrical hiss, sending them scampering home to chuckling parents who had done the same thing when they were their age. Snake shed her skin every few decades, growing ever larger, her memories carrying over to her fresh body like vivid dreams. For a day or three, she would forget who she was, hiding in her cavern deep below the blossoming Ki Mama, rattling in fright until someone from town journeyed down to reassure her, providing an offering of livestock, returning above with thick grease that would be transmuted into an elixir that healed wounds both physical and spiritual. Buoyed by the snake oil, Ki Mama could lay claim to the mantle of healthiest and happiest locale on the continent. With only a few people living in Ki Mama, this beatific existence could have stretched on indefinitely. But where happy people gather, others seeking happiness are bound to arrive. Some of these people wondered at the lack of mineral exploration, caring less for the compact with Snake than the promise of material riches. After all, they had tamed this land and Snake was merely an animal. What right did an animal have to deny them the benefit of her oil when it cost her so little to provide? Why should they stop to negotiate with a beast? Wasn't it their place to take whatever they needed, whatever they could? The first time a group of men ventured into her cave and demanded her oil, Snake assumed it was a joke. When they strapped her down and pricked her under her scales, collecting drops of the viscous orange fluid, she was so confused and shaken she didn't even fight back. The second time they came for her, she did, and after that humans stayed away for a while. They focused instead on their mining, on boring deeper into the stone, stripping it of everything it held inside. By the time that first year of intensive mining was out, the miners had been spending so much time underground that Snake's tunnels reeked of people. That spring, Snake shed her skin. When she woke and flicked out her tongue, the air tasted of smoke and saltpeter and uric acid. This was not her cavern, not the home she knew. Something terrible must have happened. Memories, vague, violent flashes sparked in her brain. Humans attacking her, cutting her. She burst from underground like a geyser, white-hot and rolling, avenging every one of her murdered brethren. The people of Stenville's Folly never stood a chance. After the settlement was decimated, after Snake's body was full and bodies lay scattered about and the bloodlust faded, she remembered where she was, who she was. Though some of the townspeople deserved their fate, many others did not. Shame and anger and despair and righteousness warred within her, and she slithered back to her cavern to meditate and sleep. For all intents and purposes, Snake considered herself dead. Decades passed, and one day, a noble salesman rode into a ghost town. Al never expected he'd die in bed, surrounded by loved ones. He isn't delusional, but he didn't expect to die hanged for a thief on the dusty outskirts of Portico either. Because although he may have grifted and conned and bent the truth, he'd never stolen anything, not in any way that an honest person could accuse him of. His sister and Sheriff Stenville didn't care, of course. If anyone lives in Portico who does care whether Aloysius P. McNutt survives the day, Al would appreciate their reveal. Hot sun bore down on hard dirt and Al's head. He sits on a bench in the back of a wagon, hands tied behind his back, ankles tied to the bench. He takes stock of the scene, calculating his odds. Sweat dampens the shirt fronts of the men and women building the scaffold from which he will swing. Every so often one of them pauses, wipes a brow, consults parchment that Al presumes are assembling instructions. Maybe they'll construct something wrong and the platform will snap before his neck does. No sign of Sheriff Stenville. Al scans the fields, tall maize stalks, sunflowers overtopping the wagon, brine apple trees sprouting where some careless traveler spat seeds years ago. Plenty of places for a lawman and his cohort to hide, waiting to see if a snake will try to save a condemned man. Of course, those same places could camouflage a snake. Foolish as it would be, if Snake does try to save him, the attempt might not be completely hopeless. Other than the workers, not many have come to witness Al's shuffling off his mortal coil. 6 guards loiter about the scaffold, sure to be joined by the 2 accompanying Al in the wagon. Maybe 30 spectators, all poor folk by the look of them, clothes washed more times than the cheap fabric can handle, sunken cheeks belying equally sunken ribs below those clothes. These are the people his father bled, the people Al tried to free by giving them back their health. If he hadn't been caught out entering town, he could have finally finished what he started. Yes, he failed then and he'd failed now, but he'd tried. Not that he did what he did for acclaim, but still, he expected a less enthusiastic reception at his execution. Maybe they worked for his sister. Maybe she's paying them to jeer. Because Althea is present too. Not back home avoiding the dirty work, not concealed in the fields preparing to battle a monstrous serpent. She wouldn't miss Al's comeuppance for the world. Smirking, she strides to the wagon, motions with the tilt of her head for the guards to untie Al from the bench. They leave his wrist bound, of course. "Big brother, I never thought I'd see the day," she says. Al sighs heavily. "Likewise. Some say that achieving vengeance leaves one feeling hollow afterward." "Wise counsel," Al says. "I'd hate to think my death might sap you of your ambition. It's a risk I'm willing to take." Best as he can, with his wrists lashed behind him, Al shrugs. "I won't argue with you. You were a kid. You didn't see what father did to people, how he built his fortune on the town's suffering, how he gained his power just because he was willing to be crueler than most. All I tried to do was to right the balance a little. Daddy helped people," Althea snaps. Though for a moment, Al thinks her voice falters. "He paid doctors to take care of people. Without him, how would they know who to care for or what to charge for it? Starving doctors can't help anyone." "What about the people who couldn't pay what father charged?" Al says, raising his voice so everyone can hear. "The folks who can't pay what you charge them now. You think every doctor in town does it for the money? That not a one actually wants to heal people? Go ahead. Release them from their contracts. Divest yourself from the school. See what happens." He chuckles ruefully. "I think that people of this town are better than you give them credit for, or at least they'd want to be. All I ever did was honor what father pretended to promise." Althea reddens. It's not due to the summer heat. Everyone's watching them, the spectators, the guards, the workers on the scaffold. Hidden in the foliage, Stenville and his posse observe as well, Al wagers. "Daddy trusted you. And you betrayed him like a worm, like a weasel, like a... "Like a snake?" a raspy voice asks as Snake burst from the fields on the side of the road opposite the scaffold. Despite the dire straits, Al can't suppress a grin at Snake's theatrical flair. Panic screams rise from the assembled spectators as they stumble over each other in their flight. Wait, Al yells. "This serpent isn't here to harm you. If anyone here remembers me, trust me, believe me now." Althea cuffs Al on the back of the head and he falls to his knees, pain jolting up his legs and spine. His jaw snaps shut on his tongue and he tastes copper. Any words he attempts now will come out garbled and dull, the one surefire way to hobble a salesman. He spits blood and prepares to speak anyway. Snake does so instead. "Friends," she rumbles, the final letter a sibilant hiss. "You needn't fear. For years I have listened to my dear compatriot Aloysius describe the wondrous town of Portico and the gentle people here. 4 years traveling the plains and forests of the frontier, how many times have I beseeched him to journey home to share my gifts with those most deserving. It is my utmost pleasure and privilege to stand before you today." Snake twists her head around, flicks her tail, displaying the lack of legs. "So to speak." Hesitant chuckles from the crowd. "What do you know?" Snake's picked up some patter. Al watches, rapt, forgetting about his furious sister standing next to him, forgetting about the armed men in the fields. "I have no doubt you've been offered snake oil before," Snake continues, "but has it ever been sold by the snake direct? Who better to vouch for its efficacy? My associate and I, at no financial risk to you." A gunshot cracks from the tall grass and a bullet ricochets off Snake's scales with a sound like a pickaxe gouging rock. She flinches, her rippling body slapping the ground. Spectators duck, hands fly to their heads. Al shouts angrily, warning Snake away. Althea triumphantly yawps and draws her own revolver. Little good it will do against Snake's natural armor, Al hopes. Snake rears back, bares her fangs, looses a hiss as loud as a tornado. From the fields, men and women rush her, brandishing guns, machetes, thick ropes, nets. Stenval steps from the field, double-barreled shotgun held to his shoulder, muzzle aimed square at Snake's open mouth. "You think you can destroy my home, my family, and get away with it? Try to portray yourself as a savior? Your people attempted to steal something freely given. You didn't deserve it. I wanted them to pay for attacking me, and I lashed out. I was angry. I'm sorry." Snake slumps as she speaks, the weight of years heavier than any net. Everyone stares. No one watches Al. He could slip into the fields, fade into the countryside, make for the sea and a boat far away. This must be Snake's plan. Distract everyone and sacrifice herself so Al can escape. And here he thought she knew him better than that. Fire rises in Al's gullet. Hands clench into fists. "Damn it all," he bellows. "Ain't none of this fair, and every soul here knows it." The roar of the crowd dims for the briefest of moments, but their surprise won't last. Surely Al's not the first condemned man to protest the noose legitimacy. "It doesn't have to be this way." Still on his knees, looking at his sister, at Sheriff Stenval, at the gathered spectators. "Living on the outskirts of civilization doesn't mean we need to exist on the knife edge of barbarism. We can work together, all of us, make something better than what's here. Maybe I didn't go about it in the most honest way before, but when you're fighting against a dishonest... We can do better. We can be better. Trust Snake, trust me, I promise you, each and every one of you shall improve in health and moreover in happiness." Althea grasps Al by the collar of his shirt and yanks him with a strength Al hadn't guessed at. He falls back, feels more hands grabbing his arms, pulling him toward the gallows. "Get out of here, Snake!" he yells. "Run!" The absurdity of telling a snake to run is not lost on him, even at this harrowing moment. Stenval confronts Snake, shotgun raised to his shoulder, narrows his eye as he takes aim. Al jerks and twists and wrenches himself free from the guard's grip, landing hard on his backside. Althea stands above him, revolver targeting his head. She draws back the hammer. A rock the size of Al's fist thuds off Althea's shoulder, knocking the revolver's muzzle askew. Even though he's on the ground, Al ducks and covers his head, presuming this stone was meant for him. "When my wife got the bitter blood fever, Albertus McNutt refused to sell her medicine," one of the spectators, a man about Al's age, shouts. "Claims she had waited too long to call for a doctor, that giving her help would be wasteful to those more deserving." A woman steps up next to him. "Albertus McNutt fined me more than a year's wages because I had an abscess drained without getting his permission first. I could barely walk with it. Without the no-good son's help burning up the credit records, I'd have been ruined." Al furrows his brow at the no-good descriptor, but likes the tack the mood is taking. Snake and Stenval watch the scene unfold, neither moving, both tensed to strike. Althea glares at the folks who dared interrupt her moment of victory. "You all want to mourn this scofflaw, feel free. You can bring flowers to his grave." To the guards, she snaps, "String him up!" The guards, who've been standing behind Al, move between him and Althea. "You'd think anyone would take this job who weren't desperate for money," one asks. "I'm still paying back Albertus McNutt long after he's dead, and my family will be paying after I'm dead, too. No man who poked a stick in his eye can be all bad." Stenville snorts a mix of disdain and amusement. I don't need assistance to kill this snake. He levels the shotgun. And I don't need any to kill this one, Althea says, her finger tightening on the trigger. That's the moment Snake chooses to make her move. Darting away from Stenville, her rattles clacking wildly, leaping in front of Althea as she pulls the trigger. Al jumps too, away from his sister, towards Stenville and his shotgun. Adrenaline spikes and slows everything. He barely hears the simultaneous gunshots. Buckshot rakes his right side from flank to ankle, stabs of sharp pain exploding down his leg. Dull pain joins it when he lands on his stomach, skidding along dirt and gravel. Al's drunk his share of snake oil elixir, but good as it is for what ails you, it has its limits. Blinking away tears, gritting his teeth, choking for breath against his lost wind, Al checks for Snake, praying the bullet ricocheted off her, that it didn't hit a soft spot or angle in under a scale. She's tough, but she's not invincible. Chaos rages around them. Guards and spectators have allied, and they grapple with Althea and Stenville and his select few loyal men. Guns fire into the ground and sky, but quickly their bullets are all spent and no one has the opportunity to reload. The rebelling townsfolk wrestle Althea and Stenville to the ground. Get out of here, the formerly obsessed woman yells in Al's general direction. He scuttles through the fray, dragging his ruined right leg, making his way to Snake's head, praying to every god he's ever heard of and a few he's made up. Blood leaks from a hole the size of a walnut. Blood and something deep amber. Snake's oil, blessing the ground where she lies dying. Al's good leg gives out and he collapses into a puddle of blood and oil. His finger curled into claws, he scoops up what he can, a mixture of vitality and dirt, and presses it against Snake's wound. He doesn't know why, he simply wants to do something, anything to staunch the flow, to keep Snake from succumbing to the wound she took for him. It doesn't occur to him to do anything for his own wounds, but his moment scrabbling in the bloody, oily mud does something for him. He may be feeling an iota of strength return. From behind, Al hears it, rattling, clacking loud like bone dice in a wooden cup, a sound that should spark fear in the deep ancestral recesses of Al's brain. He sobs a laugh. Althea and Stenville struggle against the rebelling townsfolk, and Al understands that eventually they will rise back up, both to their feet and to their social stature. The rich business person, the law enforcer, they're the ones who wield power, and they will not relinquish it lightly, no matter how much snake oil they might take. It may provide health, it may inspire those who consume it to be better people, but there are limits. Always, there are limits. Snake could end Stenville and Althea right now. She could flick her rattle and snap their spines, spread wide her jaws and swallow each of them. Al wouldn't blame her. Instead, she makes a noise like a tin coffee pot boiling on a campfire and ripples the length of her body. Oil flecks off, droplets landing on Al, the guards, the spectators, Althea, Stenville, all of them. Little of it, and Al doubts any of it, gets into their mouths, but it's something. Even now, Snake can't help but share her gift. She twists back, looks Al in the eye. Things took a bit of a turn. Al snorts. I'm inclined to agree. What say we skedaddle? Snake hisses and rattles in consternation. Al, we can't do that, she says. They need us here. And we need our lives. Do you remember what you told me when we first met? We were going to help folks. We were going to spread health and good cheer. Can't force happiness. No, but we can create the circumstances for it to flourish. Al observes the dwindling chaos. Stenville and Althea are subdued and bound. Al knows they aren't the only powerful people in town, but those folks who stood up for him, who saved him and Snake, aren't the only oppressed people in town. Maybe they also aren't the only ones willing to fight back, to grasp what is theirs and hold on tightly. He tried to help once and failed. Twice, technically. But maybe he can help now. It's frightening enough. Who's to say he won't fail again? He spits a gob of bloody saliva into the mud, looks around for a canteen. He's going to need a fresh mouth for all the salesmenning ahead. He's got to sway a lot of people, got to convert a whole town from backstabbing and grift to community and magnanimity. It's a tall order, but Snake will help, and so will the elixir, to an extent. What Al sells hasn't transformed him into a better person. It just makes him want to try.
And welcome back. That was The Science and Artistry of Snake Oil Salesmanship by Timothy Moody. And if you enjoyed that, Timothy was here not so long ago in episode 744 with the Ocean-Eyed Boy. If you want more, go back to Escape Pod 679 from May 2019 for an ever-expanding flash of light, or find his story Different People on the LeVar Burton Reads podcast from December 2021. Timothy's website at timothymoody.com has dozens of other stories available, so go fill your boots. Timothy sent us these notes on this story. Unusually for me, I came up with a title for this story first, and the story grew from there. I thought it would be fun to not only write about a snake oil salesman, but one whose elixir was the real deal. It was hard to keep it from veering into a common anti-corporate theme that runs through a lot of my work, so I figured I'd lean into it. Healthcare is a human right. Thank you, Timothy, for the notes and the story. That was just a delight, wasn't it? Sometimes you get a story where the very best word for it is satisfying. It scratches every itch you got, gives you engaging characters and a rollicking plot and food for thought too. Best compliment I can give it is it never felt like an 11,000 word story, because it pulled me through like a freight train across the West. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope the world gives us more people like Al, who really have got something to give back, who can see that trying to climb the ladder by kicking your fellow people off the rungs below just leaves you sitting atop a pile of bodies and flies. Feels like there's more than a few people out there in the world today always trying to sell us something. You could stand to learn that lesson. That was our show for this week. On behalf of everyone at PodCastle, your co-editors Shingai Enjeri Kagunda and Eleanor Arwood, assistant editor Sophie Barker, audio engineers Devin Martin and Eric Valdez, forum moderator Ossicat, and our many wonderful first readers: Aidan Doyle, Andrew Cahoe, Craig Jackson, Amalia Harrington, Julia Patt, Caitlin Zavanovich, Kieran Korsaini, Ryan Cole, Sarah S. Messenger, Shakripa Krishna Prasad, Tava Nova, Tierney Bailey, Steve Wheaties, and myself, Matt Dovey. Thank you for letting us share another story with you. The legal bit. PodCastle is part of Escape Artists Incorporated, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share it, and please do, but you cannot sell it and you cannot change it. If you want specifics, check creativecommons.org. Our music is by Shiva in Exile. Everything we do on PodCastle is 100% donor funded, and if you'd like to support what we and the rest of EA do, please join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/EApodcasts. Prefer another method? There's details for supporting us via Twitch, Amazon Prime, Ko-fi and PayPal on escapeartist.net. We'll be back next Tuesday with another fantastic tale. In the meantime, you might care to check out our sister podcasts, Escape Pod for science fiction, Pseudopod for horror, and Cast of Wonders for YA speculative fiction. If your heart belongs to us though, we'll see you next week. Be safe and be kind.